somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. Land that I heard of, oh, once in a lullaby. Oh, somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue and the dreams that you dare to dream, they really do come true. Someday I wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me. Oh, where troubles melt like lemon drops way above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, somewhere, somewhere over the rainbow. Bluebirds fly and birds fly over the rainbow. Oh, 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 why then, oh, why shouldn't I? You know, someday I wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me, where troubles melt like lemon drops way above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me, somewhere over the rainbow. I believe skies are blue the dreams that you dare to dream really do, they really do come true. Oh, if happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I? You are the face of God. You are the face of God. I hold you in my heart. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. Je m'achète. I hold you in my heart. Je m'achète. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. To say, la luce di Dio. I hold you in my heart. To say il volto dell'amore. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of love. The face of love. I hold you in my heart. You in my heart. You are my family. You are my family. You are the face of love. Face of love. You are the face of love. Face of love. I hold you in my heart. You in my heart. You are my family. You are my family. You are the face of love. Face of love. You are the face of God. Face of God. I hold you in my heart. You in my heart. You are a part of me. Part of me. You are the face of God. Face of God. You are the face of God. Eres la luz de Dios. I hold you in my heart. Eres la cara del amor. You are a part of me. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. You are the face of God. You are the face of You are the face of God. You are the face of l'image de Dieu. You are the face of God. You are the face of You are the face of God. The face of God. You are the face of God.
Good morning. You are the face of God. Welcome this beautiful Sunday morning. I'm back in the chapel with your pictures, your beautiful pictures surrounding me this morning. We are hoping for better live streaming capabilities from here. So I want to thank you for joining us for week 6 of sheltering in presence and homeschooling and home churching. So thank you for being here. We begin by lighting our candles. If you have an individual candle that you'd like to light in your home this morning, we light these candles in just remembering that each of us are shining our lights wherever we are. And a light is a beautiful representation of light itself, that you can extinguish one flame, but you can never extinguish the light. And so these lights that are the essence of all of us, we join together this morning in spirit, coming from wherever you are, and at whatever time you may be tuning in and watching this. I invite you to join me in an opening prayer. As we turn our awareness within this morning, we do so in the spirit of gratitude. The gentleness of this day allows us to go within and to really consider what ways we may be contracted and closed off And how are we being called to expand and open, to blossom into more of our potential? Today we explore this in a way that is truly liberating and uplifting. And for this sacred time to come together, we are truly grateful. Thank you, God, and so it is. Amen. I want to thank you again this morning for joining us. The title I selected for my talk today is Unprecedented Respite. Recognize your rut and rise. I posted on Facebook this week the question, what are some of the things that some of you are learning from having this break in your routine, dealing with a crisis, being at home? And the number one thing that came up is people said, I can't imagine going back to the full tilt grind I've been sustaining. Such an appreciation for respite, for time. The other top thing people said is, I will never underestimate the value of gathering with family and friends or the power of a hug. Fred said, for the rest of my life, I plan to wash my hands and say the Unity's prayer of protection. Another person said, I cleaned out my sock drawer and I swear I will never wear uncomfortable socks again. Those things that we don't have to go back to those old ways. Virgie from Hawaii said, I will never again rip packages open with my teeth. Now there's a lot of wisdom there. And the one that really spoke to me was Melissa. Melissa said, our children live in New York. Now we have Sunday dinner via Zoom. The first week when their beautiful faces appeared on the computer, I shrieked with excitement. My daughter said, Mom, you do realize this technology's been around for years, laugh out loud. She said, well, we will be having dinner with our children in New York every Sunday, and I will shriek every time I see their sweet faces. The point to me in all of this is this time of respite, of reboot, of discovering the ruts we're in and using it as an opportunity to rise up and to change. It's really allowing us to discover there are a lot of these things we could have been doing already. And so what do we want to let go of, and what new things do we want to embrace? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. Before I jump into that, though, we have two things for you. First of all, one of our members, Jessica Ayala, I asked this week, what keeps your spirit up? How are you keeping your spirit up? And when I asked her that question, she responded with video that we're going to share with you. And then we have a previously recorded song from Kat and our band, so I'll be back in just a few minutes.
Hey everyone, Rev Darlene wanted me to share with you what I've been doing to keep my spirits high. And so I just wanted to share a practice I have been doing every morning, which is just asking myself 3 questions. How do I want to feel today? What do I want to accomplish today? And what is the highest thought I can hold for myself today? I also wanted to share one of the thoughts that's popped back into my heart over the past few days, and it came from a Facebook post of a friend who was sharing about his daughter's birthday. And his wife wrote to his daughter, my wish for you is that you always stay confident in who you are, and you remember that you're daughter to a king. This really resonated with me. It's not often that we hear that exact statement, but for me, it means the same thing as saying I'm daughter to God, I am a child of the universe, I am a child of the one omnipresent, omnipotent power of God. And, it is all in the same. And it just reminds me that today, in this very moment, I am more than enough. I have more than enough. And I just want to continue to remind myself of that so that I can be open to all the many miracles and blessings that are still showing up in my life and in your life. So there's that. And I hope all of you are doing very well. And I look forward to seeing you all very soon. Take care.
Here we all are, gathered together in this place. Why are we here? What is our purpose? What is this will? How do we know what's true and what's real? We may not know where life's road will lead, but it doesn't matter, as long as we believe that God is the answer. God is the answer. God is the answer to whatever the question may be. What's going on in this world today? Where do we fit? What can we do to make a difference? What can we say? Where do we go? This way or that way? If we all prayed and truly believe and love one another and let the world see that God is the answer. I said God is the answer. Oh, God is the answer to whatever the question may be. Oh, if we all pray and truly believe and love one another and let the world see that God is the answer. I say God is the answer. I said God is the answer to whatever the question may be.
God is the answer. That song by Eddie Watkins Jr., that Cat and our Unity Band. Man, I miss having them up here and cannot wait until we can all be back together again. But again, I want to thank you for joining this morning. I want to begin with a recording that took place between the United States Navy and Canadian authorities several years ago. It happened off the coast of Newfoundland. And the Navy ship, the American said, "Please divert your course 15 degrees north to avoid collision." The Canadian authorities replied, "Recommend you divert your course 15 degrees south to avoid collision." Again, the U.S. ship. "This is the captain of a U.S. Navy ship. I say again, divert your course 15 degrees north." Canadian authorities, "No, I say again, you need to divert your course 15 degrees south." The ship, "This is the aircraft carrier USS Lincoln, second largest in our fleet. We're accompanied by 3 destroyers and numerous support vessels. I demand you divert course now 15 degrees north, that is 15 degrees north, or counter maneuvers will be taken for the safety of this ship." The Canadian authorities replied, "This is a lighthouse. Your call." I love that story because it represents sometimes how we are just so sure of the course we're on. But there's a saying that has emerged for me this week, and it's this: when nothing is certain, anything is possible. When there is no thing that is certain, anything is possible. That's what we're going to look at today when we talk about this time of unprecedented respite and recognizing where we're ready for a reboot, recognizing where we may be stuck in a rut or ways that are no longer serving us, and how do we want to rise up into a different experience. A headline caught my eyes this week of something that just happened. I believe it was earlier this week. It was really just a few days ago. This report that I read came out from the BBC, and the headline said, "How Coronavirus Inspired a Gangland Truce in South Africa." The article said, Cape Town African pastor Andy Steele Smith said, "After the coronavirus lockdown, I got a phone call from 2 different gang leaders in the same day, both saying, 'Andy, I've never asked you for anything, but we're starving.' The pastor said, 'I thought if these guys are starving and they're at the top of the food chain in Cape Town, then the rest of the community is going to be in serious trouble.' He said, 'So I told them each, if you'll come and meet me, and if you'll work together with me, I'll help you.' And so he had the 2 rival gang members come in, and before long, there were 4 different rival gang groups that came together. And he said that if they would work together and call a truce and distribute food, that he would help all of them. And that's exactly what they did. The article said, in the face of a common challenge, some of South Africa's most violent gangs have put down their weapons and are working together to help their whole community cope with the coronavirus. It's being hailed as a miracle, an unprecedented truce. The pastor said, 'If I die, I will die a happy man, because I've never seen anything like this.' They interviewed a number of the gang members, and many of them said, 'I've never seen anything like this. I've never imagined anything like this.' The person from BBC posed the question to several of the gang members and said, 'After this is over, will you return to rivalry and violence, or will you continue to work together?' No one knew for sure, but many of them used the word hope. And he said that you could literally see their countenance light up as for the first time in many of their lives, they began to sense a new possibility. You know, that question is not only applicable for a gang in South Africa, that question is applicable for each and every one of us today. That after this is supposedly over, will we go back? Will we go back to things and ways or ruts or patterns that really weren't serving us well? Or will we use this as an opportunity to grow forward? That there's no question that we've never experienced a time like this, an opportunity like this, a global reset. And we have the power to determine individually and then collectively, what will we stand for? What will we show up for? What will we invest in? What am I going to create going forward? The question when we really consider this, I want to look at it in a sense of saying, where in my life am I contracting? Am I shutting down? And where in my life am I opening and expanding into a new way of being? In the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus is attributed as saying, if you bring forth what is within you, it will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, it will destroy you. It's saying if you bring forth your very best, if you bring forth your honest to goodness, highest and best, if you bring forth your wholeness, if you bring forth all that you've got, it will lead you to your own salvation. It will lead you into the further evolving of your and embracing your own wholeness. But if we hold back, if we withhold, then we're contracting, we're bottling up the life force, we're withholding and cutting off within our own self. You know, if you think about what is it that gives rise to violence, to hurt, to hatred? What is it that gives violence to fear that's run amok? What is it that gives rise to these things? It's always separation. That if we feel separate, then we act in ways that can be hurtful. But if we feel connected and whole, if we feel in connection with our own wholeness, then we can't act in those ways. Siddhartha said, "It is in the nature of truth or love, cosmic consciousness, to express itself, to affirm itself, to overcome difficulties. More than happiness, love wants growth, the widening and deepening of awareness and consciousness and being." You know, in this time, if we think about that every day, that whatever's going on in my life, whatever's going on in your life, that love wants growth, that love wants more of me. Love wants more of me to be consumed by all that I am as an expression of all that is. And so to bring forth our highest and best. So we look at how in our lives are we contracting? Are we shutting off? Are we withholding? Are we shrinking down? And how in our lives are we opening, expanding to connect? Now, between contracting and expanding, there's a process. There's a bridge, if you will. And the distance and the difference between being contracted and being expanded is a shift in awareness. With the story of the ship and the lighthouse, with the story of the gang members, what's beginning to take place, what takes place in those stories is a shift in awareness. It's beginning to see ourselves as more than the story, as more than our past, as more than maybe we thought possible before. But in this point in time, when nothing is certain anymore and everything becomes possible, how do we open to that? So the way that we begin to make that shift is to let that within to begin to rise up and come out. A Course in Miracles says the ego seeks to divide and separate. I would say the ego seeks to divide and conquer and separate. But it's the spirit within that is always seeking to unify, to heal, to reveal the truth of our being. Entering into a more expanded state of awareness. Learning to open to new possibilities. Learning to open and believe that we can show up differently. There's a story that comes from the Hindu tradition. It's a Hindu parable that I heard Mark Nebo tell that begins to illustrate this beautifully. The parable says, an aging master grew tired of his young apprentice constantly complaining. And so one morning he sent him for some salt. When the apprentice returned, the master instructed the unhappy young man to put a handful of salt in a glass of water and then drink it. How does it taste? The master asked. Bitter, said the apprentice. The master chuckled and then asked the young man to take the same handful of salt and now go pour it into the lake. The two walked in silence to the nearby lake, and once the apprentice swirled his handful of salt in the water, the old man said, now drink from the lake. As the water dripped down the young man's chin, the master asked, how does it taste? Fresh, remarked the apprentice. Do you taste the salt? Asked the master. No, said the young man. At this, the master sat beside this unhappy young man who actually reminded him so much of himself. And he said, the pain of life is like pure salt, no more, no less. And the amount of pain, the amount of salt remains the same, exactly the same. But the amount of bitterness we taste depends on the container that we put it in. So when you're in pain, when you're in a rut, when you're stuck, when you don't know how to show up differently, what you need to do is enlarge your sense of being. Stop being the glass and become the lake. It's a beautiful, powerful story. Another author said, if you remember you are the ocean, then you are always more vast than any of the waves. So we begin by bringing awareness and noticing, how am I contracting? How am I comparing and complaining and believing that I can't change? And then what shift? How can I shift my awareness so that I am actually in a more expansive state of being? To come to recognize that, the stories that we have. I heard a meditation teacher, one time I was on a meditation retreat with Robert Brummett when I was in seminary. And we were, for one of the first times in my life, I was having to sit for a long time and be with my mind. One thing about this time for many people being at home is like, how do you like your own company? How do you like the noise in your own head? And after one of our sittings, he instructed us, he said, the next time that you sit in the silence, he said, I want you to pretend that every thought that comes up, that every feeling that comes up, that everything that comes up, I want you to pretend that it's not actually yours, but it's the person beside you, that it's theirs, that somehow it just got in your head. And notice the difference. And it was absolutely fascinating for me that time around when I sat for like 90 minutes. You just sit, and every time, which is pretty much constant, that the stream of thought, these ideas, these feelings come up for you to say, well, that's interesting, that's not mine, that's my neighbor's. That's interesting, that's not mine, that's my neighbor's. And it's not a practice of disowning what's yours. It's a practice of learning to differentiate between the waves in the ocean, the storms that come through, and the container that you are that can hold all of it. And our whole world is being shaken up right now to say, you are more than the story that's going on. You are more that's happening. You're certainly in it. You're in every bit of this. And be accountable, be responsible. But a part of that is to open up and discover that I am a part of all that is, and to bring that forth. So how are we contracting, closing down, shutting down, closing off? And how are we being called to expand, to open in our awareness of who we really are, who all beings are, and what is possible for us? There's another story that to me just really touches on this point. It comes from Maria Popova. She has an article or a podcast that she calls Brain Pickings. But she was asked in 2016 to deliver the commencement address for the graduating class at the University of Pennsylvania. And she told this true story during her address to the college students. Maria said, it was a beautiful spring day, and I was very much enjoying a bike ride. And the river and it was beautiful. The spring air smelled of plum blossoms. And then I sensed someone behind me in the bike path, catching up, going even faster than I was fast going. And suddenly I felt competitive. He was trying to overtake me, and I started pedaling faster. Now, we've all felt that, whether it's running, swimming, biking, or I can distinctly remember times being in my car at a stop sign and looking over and seeing somebody else and the light changes and just having this impulse to go faster than they are. And then remember, I drive a Buick Encore, and that's probably not going to happen. But, all of you can sense that of you're walking and someone starts overtaking you. It's just that feeling of being overtaken or being outdone. So Maria said, so I pedaled faster, but he kept catching up. Eventually he did overtake me, and I felt strangely defeated. But as he cruised past me, I realized the guy was on an electric bike. Well, then I both felt a sort of redemption and a great sense of injustice. Unfair motorized advantage, very demoralizing to the honest, muscle-powered peddler. But just as I was getting all self-righteously existential, I noticed something else. He had a restaurant name on his back. He was a food delivery guy. He was rushing past me not because he was trying to slight me or because he had some unfair competitive advantage in life, but because this was his daily strife. It's how this immigrant made his living. My first response was to shame myself into gratitude for how fortunate I've been, because I too am an immigrant from a pretty poor country, and it's some miraculous confluence of choice and chance that has kept me from becoming a food delivery person on an electric bike trying to survive in New York City. Or I thought, perhaps this guy has a more satisfying life than I do. Perhaps he had a good mother and goes home to the love of his life and plays the violin at night. I will never know. But the point is, the second I begin comparing my pace to his, the second I begin comparing my life to his, I am vacating my own experience of that beautiful spring day and ejecting myself into some sort of limbo life that is neither mine nor his. She said, here's the thing about self-comparison. In addition to making you vacate your own experience, your own soul, your own life, in its extreme, it breeds resignation. Now, it's kind of funny. I was thinking about this comparison thing today, and I'm one of those people that haven't got my check yet. And I've been looking online at how many people have their checks deposited in their banks. And our church applied for the payroll protection plan too, and we didn't get it before the money ran out. So it's always funny what I'm working out, because I had opportunity this week to think about, am I complaining? Am I comparing? And it's about being able to take that deep breath, and it doesn't mean we accept anything at all. It means we continue to work for justice and due diligence. We certainly do those things. But it's about, am I getting caught up in the wave? And can I relax and remember I'm the ocean? Is the bitterness that I'm entangled with that is causing me to constrict and close down, is it because my container is too small? And how do I shift in my perspective in order to expand my sense of self so that I can be present to do the things I need to do and yet be completely open to the unfolding of my full potential? Where in your life are you contracting? Are you closing off, armoring up, comparing, complaining, whatever? And how are you being called to open up in a way that expands you, to open up in a way that blooms more love in your entire being? Finally, the final story, and if we have some recorded music, if you could begin that now. The final story I want to share with you that to me gets into the how of this is a true story about a man who had, his wife died of cancer, and so he was a widow, and they had a daughter, so he was left with his daughter, and his daughter was in her mid-20s. And the daughter had already been struggling, but when she lost her mom, she just really lost it and started battling with addiction, drugs. And this went on, off and on for several years until she was now 30 years old. And the dad, wanted to be super dad and certainly loved his daughter. He put her in rehab, and she'd get out and she'd fall off the wagon again and back into drugs. And he was having real difficulty maintaining those boundaries of loving her and yet doing what was his to do and not crossing those boundaries that she had to come into an experience with her own reality. And so he said that he read something by Henry David Thoreau. He read the words that said, "A single footstep will not make a path on the earth So a single thought will not make a pathway in the mind. To make a deep physical path, we walk again and again and again. To make a deep mental path, we must think over and over the kind of thoughts we wish to dominate our lives. It was linked to the scripture in Romans 12, don't be conformed to the patterns of this world, but be ye transformed by the renewal of the mind. He knew that he needed help before he could ever really help his daughter. And so what he did after her last time in rehab, and she went back into an addictive lifestyle yet one more time. And as her pattern always was, come home to daddy and ask for money. And this particular time, he said he stopped and he looked at her and he said, honey, I can't hold this. I, your daddy, I, your father, I can't hold this. And he said, so I'm going to have to offer it up. I'm going to have to offer you up. I'm going to have to offer up your addiction. I'm going to have to offer up my not knowing how to do this. I'm going to have to offer it all up to something that is so big it can hold all of it. And that's all I know to do. And he said for the first time in his life, he had the courage to close the door and leave her standing there, which literally broke his heart, of course. But in the interview, he just said he kept doing that over and over, that as his mind, he'd want to rush out and find her and give her some money. He'd want to do this or he'd want to do that. He would literally use his hands and say, I can't hold this. I can't hold this. And somehow he was becoming that bridge between contracted and expanded. And that power of saying, I can't hold this, was the realization that I am part of what is holding me. There is a dimension to me and life and all that is that can hold everything that is going on and can lead me and guide me into new and higher ways of being. Long story short, it didn't happen immediately. It wasn't an easy path. But after about 18 months of her totally floundering and hitting her bottom, she took herself for help. Today, that young woman is in her mid-40s. She's married. She has grown kids, and she works as a counselor in a high school. And it all began by a person saying, I can't hold this. And so I ask you, where in your life are you saying, I can't hold this, or I don't want to hold this, I don't want to go back? As the gang members hopefully will say, I don't want to go back to rivalry and violence. I don't want to go back to working myself to death. I don't want to go back to taking this for granted. I don't want to go back to consuming things I don't need. I don't want to go back to whatever. And to say, I can't hold this. And it is in that place of emptiness we come to discover we are the place that God lives and moves and breathes and has our very being. I want to invite you to close your eyes if you're comfortable doing so. And to think about something where you would say, I can't hold this, or I don't want to maintain this anymore. Just start with one thing. And then to offer it up. Now when you offer it up, I want you to visualize the strongest, most spiritually grounded presence you can imagine. Call it God, call it Jesus, call it Buddha. Call it an indigenous elder, call it your soul, call it all that is, but I want you to imagine the most grounded, vast presence you can imagine. And that when you offer it up, I can't hold this. I want you to feel that presence come and support you. Feel the steadfastness of that pure being. Feel the assurance of that vast presence. Feel the possibility that exists in this presence. And now begin to merge with this presence, to realize that the personification of these qualities is the personification of any being, of beingness itself. And that in and through and as this expanded state of being, all things become possible. This week, we commit to this practice of offering up those things that no longer serve, those things that we can't figure out. And it's not a giving up, it's a giving over. And taking the time to be present to this presence in which we live and move and have our very being. Unprecedented respite. Unprecedented time to reboot, to choose again, to reset our course, to recreate anew. And so in the name and in the nature of all that is holy, in the name and in the nature of this holy presence that is our very essence, we say thank you, God. Thank you, God. And so it is. And so it is. I want to thank you for being gathered with me at this time again this week. I invite you into that practice daily, to offer it up and to imagine the most spiritually expansive and grounded, filled with potentiality presence that you can imagine. And then merge with that presence. I am the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. I am the place where God shows up. You are the place where God lives, moves and breathes and has its being. You are the place where God shows up. Now that may or may not have matched the music. I have no idea. But you know how much we love that song. I love each and every one of you. I want to thank you. Join us daily, Monday through Friday at noon and 8 p.m. for a call-in for a prayer. There's some things going on throughout the week. They're on our website. And then last but not least, I want to thank each and every one of you, whether you've sent $5 or $50 or $100 or whatever you could send. You know, these Sunday services are the way that the majority of our income comes in. And so I want to personally ask you to go online to make a donation, whatever feels good and feels right for you. I'm happy to let you know that we closed out our first quarter in the black, all thanks to you. Thank God through working through each and every one of you, and I appreciate your continued support. You have a wonderful week. We've got an announcement for you, and then a wonderful song to close it out with our CAT and our Unity Band again. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellen Winter, President of the Board of Trustees of Unity of the Blue Ridge. I'm here today with my donkeys, who are wonderful examples of how to live in the moment. And they are happy as long as they're eating, and so are we. So it's important during this uncertain financial time that we are able to feed those we love and ourselves. It's also important for us to be able to feed our spiritual community so that it can continue to feed us and keep us grounded and centered in our source. So please send your tithes and offerings to Unity. You can go to our website, unityofblueridge.org, and hit the donate button so that we can continue to be fed until we're back together again. Thanks.
Living in the sunset, lightning in my bones. Push me to the edge, but my will is stone. Because I believe in a better way. Fools will be fools and wise will be wise. But I look at this world, I look it straight in the eyes. Because I believe in a better way. Oh yes, I believe in a better way. What good is a man who won't take a stand? What good is a cynic with no better plan? I believe in a better way. Yes, I believe in a better way. way to make it a better way. I believe in a better way. I feel it coming. Oh. I say I believe in a better way. Oh, it's coming, it's coming. I believe in a better way. Take it there, baby, take it. Woo! I believe in a better way. A better way for you, a better way for me. I believe in a better way. Yeah, I believe in a better way. I believe in a better way.
Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high. There is a land that I heard